Hey guys, welcome to another market focus. So there's a lot of buying opportunities I see for next week. Like on most of the pairs, I see a lot of buying opportunities. But the tricky part about it is when you have a lot of buying opportunities, or when you see prices pointing to one direction on almost all the pairs, you need to be very careful, because coming into next week you can see the opposite moves. But we'll look at it, we'll look at these opportunities lining up for next week. And before that, let me show you the positions we had for last week. I'll show you the trades we had for last week. So I had three pairs I was looking at, or three asset classes I was looking at. So the first one, I was looking at BTC. I didn't take a trade on BTC actually. And then I had gold, I had US30, NAS100, and the S&P 500. So I'll look at US30 because eventually I had to retrade. So we'll look at US30 for example. I had a selling opportunity I was looking at on US30 right here. I did attempt these sales and it didn't go properly. So we had an initial push to the downside, and then I had my stops move to break even. So I had a break even on this position, so I didn't make anything on this one. And on NAS100 as well, I was looking for a selling opportunity on NAS100, targeting these lows here, and this one took me out, so I had minus 1% on this. I was looking at the S&P 500 as well. I had sales on the S&P 500 targeting these lows as well, and it didn't go, so I had minus 1 on this pair as well. So last week I had two retrades, one on US30, which was a break even, a loss on NAS100, and a loss on the S&P 500. So those were the positions I was looking at, and let's just move straight into it and see what's lining up for next week. And as usual, if you're new here, the first thing we look at is the DXY, because an understanding of the DXY just gives you a view as to what is going to happen, or it makes it easy for you to analyze. So I'll start on the daily time frame on the DXY. So when we look at it from the daily time frame, we had this massive move to the downside, and we've been trading from say 106. We went through 105 and tested 104, and while price kept doing all this testing of these levels, you can see clearly that at 104 we had this difficulty at this point. So there was this difficulty for price to move past 104, and we had an impulsive move to the upside, which was this move. We had this impulsive move, and going off of what we had last week, I was expecting this buys to continue, but in a corrective manner. So I was expecting something like this to happen on the DXY, and however, the pullback, the initial pullback, which is this one, came in very impulsive. So I wasn't expecting prices to really go past 105. I was expecting a pullback to 105, a test of this area, and we see prices moving to the upside. So this didn't happen as planned. So prices went through 105 and then it came right back up, so above 105, and we didn't really test 104 when prices went through it. So the interesting thing about this right now is looking at it from the daily time frame and going off of psychological numbers. We've gone through 105, so sellers came through 105 and buyers responded immediately, and they took prices again through 105. So the game plan for me coming into next week is the possible move back to 105, test this area and show me that this area is holding and the sellers cannot really go past this point. Then we could see prices moving now to 106. So that's the first possibility, and we can look at this on lower time frames just to understand what is happening to this piece of price action. And again, the reason I look at the most recent price action is because I'm looking for opportunities next week. I'm not looking for opportunities next month. So I'm looking for something I can do next week, and that's why I'm just focused on this piece of price action, because if I'm able to break this down, and then it becomes easy for me to prepare for next week. So if we step down to lower time frames, so I'll go through the 8-hour time frame. So you can see here we had this impulsive move from the sellers, and when you look at the buys that came in, so I'm comparing these buys to what I'm seeing here, and you can tell this buys is more choppy, or it's not as impulsive as what you have here when you compare this one to the to this right here. It's not as impulsive. So it's telling me, in as much as the buyers did this rejection to the upside, they didn't do it with a lot of volume, because we've taken out these highs, but it's not impulsive. So we should expect a pullback to come in before the buyers resume again to the upside. So that's what I'm looking at, and I'll keep moving to lower time frame. So this is the 8-hour time frame, and we'll move down to the 4-hour time frame. And before we go to the 4-hour time frame, again, this is the area I'm focused on. I just want to step down to lower time frames and see what is actually happening with this choppy move to the upside from the buyers. So it's not as impulsive as what we had here. So it's choppy. It's like they're struggling to make these buys. So I want to step down to lower time frames to see what price is telling me. Is there a possibility that buyers will hold at this point and then take prices to 106? Or is there a possibility for a pullback to come and say deeper and test 105, and then we see prices eventually moving to 106? Or you get the crash and you see prices moving to 104. So let's go, say, to the 4-hour time frame, and we'll see. So on the 4-hour time frame, when I come here, I'm looking, and there is a possibility that if you go to lower time frames like the hourly time frame, you could see a trend that is building up here, and this trend that is building up is going to tell us more about this piece of price action. So on the 4-hour time frame, again, it's quite difficult to tell just looking at this piece of price action, but from what we're looking at on the daily time frame, I'm expecting these buyers to step down to 105, and that is simple because when you trade using psychological numbers, which is something I use a lot, and it's a principle I keep talking about on here, when price goes through a psychological number, so let's look at this one. So when price had a test of this area, you see price coming back to test this area before making the move to the downside. Once price came to the downside, it had a test of this area, it made a move, it came back, it had another test, then you had this massive move to the upside. So when I'm looking at this right here, I'm looking at this and saying, all right, we went through this area, we didn't really test 105, so I'm expecting sellers to come in, test 105 and give me some kind of like this reaction at 105, and just show me that it's difficult for sellers to take prices to the downside. Then I'll confidently say the buyers will eventually take prices to 106 or test areas like 107, an area like this. So it just depends on what happens, and it depends on these sales coming in. So I'll look at lower time frames again. So I'll step down to say the hourly time frame, so we can look on the hourly time frame and see what's happening on the hourly time frame. So the aim for me on the hourly time frame is to see if there's a trend building up here, because if you have a trend building up and it's not able to take prices to 106 and the trend gets violated, there's a high possibility we could see prices testing 105. So I'll look at the hourly time frame real quick, and straight on the hourly time frame, now you can see this. So if you put, say, a trend line right here, it's quite easy to tell. On the having this trend line, you have price making higher highs, and there's a low, higher highs, higher low, higher high, there's a low here, there's a higher high, there's a low, price makes a high, it bounces, and you had the bounce on this trend line, price didn't even go take out this area, and right now you have price trading outside this trend to the upside. So I'm expecting some kind of a pullback or some kind of a consolidation around this area, and we could see price stepping to an area like 105, just looking at it from the hourly time frame and the trend that is building up on the hourly time frame. And this is going to make more sense when you look at it from the daily time frame as well, because it gives you the bigger picture. But on the hourly time frame, this is what I'm expecting. So now this is my primary buyers coming into next week. I'm looking at this consolidation here. There might be a little push to the upside, but eventually I think we might see prices testing 105. Now if this doesn't happen, there is another possibility. So if this doesn't happen, we could see a consolidation here, and we could see the buyers take prices to 106, and once prices get to 106, if we get that reaction at 106 telling us there's this inability for prices to go past 106, and if the sellers come in impulsively again, we could see prices moving to the downside. So first one, you can have, say, a consolidation here, prices struggling, and you see they move to 105, or you see prices moving to 106, rejection at this point, and eventually getting prices back to 105. So coming into next week here, my primary bias is to see sellers take prices to 105. Now this will depend on a lot of factors, so there's other things that's going to drive prices to come to 105, and I could be wrong as well, and we just see prices move past 106. So we could see prices move past 106, and you see prices making its way, say, to 107. But just going off of like the technicals, going off of what price is telling me, going off of the psychological numbers and the way price reacts, we now see price going through a psychological number. There's a high possibility price comes back to test the psychological number, gives you a reaction at that point, and then you see the move eventually happening. Now this move could be to the upside, or you can have, say, a break to the downside. So that's it for me on the DXY. And having this bias on the DXY already, with a primary focus knowing I'm expecting prices to test 105 coming into next week, I'll move to a pair. Let's say we look at US30. So with US30, this one is quite interesting because we're just staying on the hourly time frame, and back on the DXY, if we expecting the DXY to make this move to 105, which is just going off of the technicals, then on US30 we had prices settling around 39,000. So we had this massive move to the upside, price tested 39,000, came back, tested 39,000, and we had the move to the downside. So normally when price moves from one psych number, we should test the next psychological number. But when you look at this from the hourly time frame, so price is making a low, or it makes an impulsive move to the downside, it gives us a low, makes another impulsive move, there's a high, makes another impulsive move, gives us another high. And I'm just going to zoom in on this real quick. So if you look closely right here, so every time price made a low, there was a pullback making new lows. Price made another low, there was a pullback. There was that inability right here for prices to make new lows. So we're coming off of this level of 39,000, and we're finding it difficult to reach areas like 38,000. So going off of what might happen on the DXY, which is a test of 105 on the DXY, I'm expecting this bias on US30 to test at least an area like 39,000. So when the markets open, I'll probably go in aggressively with the buy on this. So I'm looking at something like this on US30. I'm looking for a possible buy on this, and this could take out this area. So we could see prices taking out these highs right here. So prices could eventually go past 39,000, and we see something like all the way to 40,000 next week. But this is a very massive move, and it's going to take time. But the initial focus for me is just to see prices get to 39,000, like an area right here. So if the risk to reward is not good, I'll just be patient and see if they pull back and come in, and I get a good entry. An area like this, 1:2 is fine, or maybe say 1:3. So that's what I'm looking at on US30 coming into next week. Now that's my primary bias, and again guys, price can do what it really wants to do. So we could come in next week and you see US30 dropping, and if this happened, then I'm just gonna sit aside and watch what happens, get a reaction at 38,000, make a decision if I want to buy or shut the market again at this point. But my primary bias is to take this bias for US30 at this point right here and see if we can test 39,000 and even go higher than that. So the next one I'm looking at is NAS100. Interesting pair as well, and I'm just going to show you this real quick. So the way these indices always trade is quite easy for me. So we had this move right here. So we had a move going through 19,000, which was a move coming from say 18,000. We had a consolidation at this point, and all what this consolidation was doing is price went through the psychological number. You had a test of it, test of it, and then a massive move to the upside. And right now we have another consolidation right here, and prices taking out these highs, so we could get, say, a pullback test on area like this and eventually see prices going up to 20,000. So that's what I'm looking at on NAS100. And again, it's quite easy because you're having a similar move that is happening right here. So if you just like, it's like a mirror image of what is happening here. You have a massive move, correction or consolidation. There's a massive move, there's a correction here, or there's this consolidation, and we should see prices making its way to 20,000. So we've tested 19,000 several times. We tested this area several times. We kept testing 19,000, kept testing 19,000, and you can see these psychological numbers. It tells you the bigger story as well. It tells you. So we had difficulties going through 19,000, impulsive move, consolidation. We should see prices testing 20,000, and that's simply just going off of the psychological numbers and what price is telling you. Technically, there's a consolidation. We're breaking out of this. We could get a pullback just to test an area like this, but then we should eventually make our way to 20,000. And when you look at this, say, US30 NAS100, and let's look at the S&P real quick. So the S&P 500, again, this is a good one, and I think when the markets open, I'm going to go in on this one really aggressively. I'm taking the buys on this. I'm not waiting for prices to pull back. And the reason is simple. You've had prices coming off of 5,400, which is a psychological number right here. And I'll zoom in on this real quick. Massive move going through 5,400. You see sellers coming in. They're struggling to make this low. Eventually they make a low. So you can see the lows here is not as impulsive as you should expect. So you have these lows coming in very shallow, and then we have a test of what, 5,400 right here. Now there's another possibility, because with psych numbers, again, as I told you, you might see price testing this level before the move coming in. But just going off of these technicals, I think I like this level already. We had a test of this area, we had a pullback. I'm just going to zoom in again, and you can see right here we had this pullback. So I was expecting these sellers to test this area, and it was quite difficult for it to even make its way to 5,400, and then we had buyers coming in. So if the force is really high on the DXY, then we could see prices holding at this point, and the next level we're looking at is 5,500. Now this is quite simple, and it's not like a lot of technicals I'm doing on this one. It's just going off of these psychological numbers. When price rejects at one psychological number, just watch what is going to happen. There's a high possibility we get a test of this area. And just like we saw what was happening on NAS100, you had an impulsive move, you had a massive consolidation, you had this break to the upside, another massive consolidation. So we should expect this break kind of a test, and then we see prices making its way to 5,500. All of this is happening going off of my primary bias on the DXY, knowing that the DXY is eventually going to drop. So we might have this drop from this point on the DXY. We might get the drop on this point, or we might see prices moving to 106 and then eventually get the drop. If price decides to do something like this, then on pairs like US30, you might see prices coming back down just a little bit, but eventually holding. Then you see prices moving to the upside. On NAS100, you can see a pullback coming in, but again holding within this consolidation. Eventually you see the move to the upside. And the same thing on the S&P 500. You might see price testing this area and then a move to the upside. If this doesn't happen, if the DXY holds at this point and then it drops, then you could see these prices just take off from this point to the upside, take off to the upside as well. On the S&P, takes off to the upside. And let's look at the last one, which is gold. Same concept. We're looking at this psychological number right here of 2,300. So price came in very impulsively from the sellers. We took this area out, but we came right back in, because you can see the buyers are really impulsive on this one. We had another test of this area. This psychological number still held at this point. Sellers couldn't take prices go past 2,300. We had this move to the upside. It wasn't like the perfect time for this to take off. We had another test of this psychological number. So we've been testing this area, and there's this difficulty for sellers to go past this point. So eventually, if it's so difficult for them to go past this point, going off of this principle of just psychological numbers again, we should see prices creeping back to 2400, taking out areas like this, and just giving us this move to the upside. So that's what I'm looking at on gold. Now when you zoom out on gold, I said this last week, when you zoom out on gold, this is what you're looking at. You're looking at this massive consolidation right here. So the piece of price action I'm just trying to focus on is what we have right here. Drop from the sellers, consolidation, drop from the sellers, inability to go past this point. Then we could see prices making its way to the upside. So with this move on gold, I'm going to show you this real quick. So I have a position that's currently running on gold. So if we look at this, I got in on this last week. So I got in on this buys on gold last week, and I'm still holding this, and I'm looking at a test of this area or prices making new highs. So if you look back on the chart, I got in on this buys, I think at an area around here, and right now we're here. So when the markets open, I'll probably move my stops to break even and just manage this accordingly. So I'm still looking for a possibility where prices could go back to 2400. So I'm holding this position, and it's a swing position, so it's going to take time. It's going to take a couple of days. So that's it guys for this week. So again, looking at the DXY, primary focus on the DXY is just to see this prices drop to 25 to 105, and I'm looking at these possibilities, holding around here, we get the drop, or we move to 106, eventually get the drop. And if that happens, we should see this indices moving again to the upside. That's S&P, NAS100 to the upside, US30 to the upside, and gold as well to the upside. So I'm very much focused on the buys coming into next week on all these asset classes, the metals, gold, silver and stuff like that. I've not looked at silver because I don't really trade that, but US30 looking for buying opportunities, NAS100 buying opportunities, S&P500 buying opportunities, and then Bitcoin as well, but I'm not going to break down the Bitcoin chart right now. So that's it for this week's analysis guys. If you find this interesting, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, use the comment section as well. See you next week. Bye for now.